Hey everybody, it's Susie McMahon with Tales from the Low Country, and this is Susie McMahon with Tales from the Low Country. I'm going to put the wait bot on for just a few minutes while I make sure my guest can find me here in our show. So listen to the wait bot, and I'll be right. Hi Estelle, how are you? We're still in the wait mode. I'm just gonna make sure everything's all set. You good to go?
So when I hit on your icon, it says Susie. I'm going to press this.
Hi Estelle, no worries, no rush. Just go ahead when you're ready, and I'm going to send you an invitation to video, and we'll get started momentarily.
Okay.
I am having a little bit hard time hearing you, but there you are. Hi Estelle, welcome.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Wonderful. So just a moment ago, I was telling Woody, who's in our audience, and anybody else that might be watching simultaneously, that I was waiting for you, and here you are. So I'm just going to get us started. How's that sound?
Good. Sounds great.
You hear me okay? All right.
I can hear you.
Fantastic. So hi, everybody. Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Susie McMahon, and I am the host for this show. It's pretty new on Fireside, even though I've been a approved creator since the original beta test. But anyway, the Low Country is a geographical region that is quite unique. It's the area of our country, the United States of America, where there's a little bit of North Carolina, most of the coast of South Carolina and Georgia, and a little bit of Florida. And it's the part of our country where it's so unique because the land meets the marsh, and then the marsh meets the sea. And everything that comes along with the fact that the tides are made, that tides recreate the world every single day, twice a day. A friend of ours, Jonathan Hout, had been, I can quote him in saying that it's almost like because of that, maybe that's why there's so many creatives from the Low Country. And Estelle is my guest tonight, and she's coming to us live from Beaufort, South Carolina. Estelle, welcome to Fireside. I know you've been on here a little bit. What do you think of it? Can you hear me, Estelle?
I'm not seeing us though. I'm just seeing the reel, and I'm not sure if I need to do something.
Okay.
But if you can see me,
don't worry about it. I can see you fine.
Okay.
And yeah, let me make sure you're up on stage. So there might be just a glitch. So just go ahead, and I'll give you a pause after I ask a question and have you answer, and we'll see if things improve.
Button here that says author Estelle Ford-Williamson and Susie McMahon. Should I hit that?
It's sure, up there above the line. So the people that are on stage are you and me.
Okay.
So maybe there's a duplicate. There is a
We'll
duplicate.
Go ahead. I can hear you, and you can hear me and see me, and I
can.
I know what you look like, so we're good.
Wonderful. So Estelle, tell me a little bit about about how we know each other. Why don't you share with everybody when we first met, and then we're going to go into your creative works.
Okay. It was my pleasure to meet you through the Conroy Center. You had this idea of this Lux Low Country literary tour of all of the sites that were special to Pat Conroy. I came to this Conroy Center and became active with it as soon as it was started. Pat died in 2016, and that fall there was a literary festival, and I became part of that, or I attended it, and then I became taking part in programs there. So it was through that connection that I met Donna Armour and Dana Eidenhower and quite a few other people that you gathered us all to help you help this tour come to life. And it was a fundraiser for the Pat Conroy Center, which we all love. And we need it to continue all the writing and the speakers, the writers coming to town, and they come from all over. So that's how we met, in that wonderful mix of creatives, particularly writers that's in Beaufort. I happened to move there to Beaufort from Atlanta. And we actually had the land in 2006, and we were going to swap some coastal property we had in the Georgia area for this property and to buy it. Well, that didn't happen because the recession also happened. So all of a sudden we had a VRBO opportunity, and we did that for 10 years. We ran it as a VRBO while we lived in Atlanta, and then eventually moved down here. What that did is that gave me more time to get used to the area, to find where things were. And I'd already learned so much about low country ecology from living for having property on the Georgia coast that I was just ready for this. It was just wonderful. The birds greeted us. We even had a little alligator greet us. We're on a coastal, well, in Georgia, we'd call it a river. In South Carolina, they call it a creek. But it's very wide, very deep, and we have lots of crabs and fish and things in our area here. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah,
the low country is so fantastic, and I just wanted to introduce you to everybody. Is that okay with you if I read your bio to all of our listeners? And I just wanted to let you know that I am getting an alert that says there's an issue with simultaneous casting. We are simultaneously being broadcast on YouTube live, and that is working fine. The other land is not working. But I'm going to go ahead and read your bio. Estelle Ford-Williamson is a novelist and last time I had a hard time saying this, memoirist?
Right, memoirist, sure.
Memoirist, whose most recent book, set in Rising FAWN, Georgia, a fictional location, I believe, has won awards from the Sandhills Writers Conference and the Atlanta Writers Conference. Her previous books were Abbeville Farewell, a novel of early Atlanta and North Georgia, a nominee for the Townsend Fiction Prize, and Seed of South Sudan, a memoir of a lost boy refugee, which was co-written by Majoke Marrier. She's received Poets and Writers Inc. grants for readings and workshops in Atlanta and New York, and has presented memoir workshops through the Pat Conroy Literary Center in Beaufort, South Carolina, as well as the Lew Walker Senior Center in DeKalb County, Georgia. A short story drawn from Rising FAWN was a finalist for the Short Story American Festival in 2017. Born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Ford-Williamson graduated from St. Mary's College, Notre Dame, Indiana, and worked as a reporter for UPI in Atlanta, where she later worked as management trainer and career specialist before writing her first novel. We just heard about her move to Beaufort, South Carolina back in the area of 2016. Welcome, Estelle.
I feel like I'm in the best of both worlds, having the mountains and the ocean as part of my life. It's wonderful.
It is wonderful, isn't it? Tell us about your work history and then how it came to you writing your novel. And I think you said there might be a unique story about how long it took to get it going, and you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I'll make that a second part of it. My work, I always wanted to be a writer. In high school, my yearbook is full of references to my first novel and how they want to read it. And I went to school in South Bend. I had a full scholarship. It was working scholarship outside Chicago, across the street from the University of Notre Dame. I had many rich experiences there, but I didn't major in writing. They didn't have a writing major. They had a minor, and I majored in something rather broad, which was humanities and history. So I learned a lot of historical writing and philosophy and art, things like that. So I went to Chicago to finish my education by taking electives there, took courses at Northwestern University, and then cold weather really did me in. I decided I wanted to be closer to Atlanta. Home would have been Chattanooga. It was, to me at the time, it was not the vibrant town it is now, the extremely vibrant town it is now. It was very limited in the options, particularly for women. So I went to Atlanta where there was a lot more opportunity, and I became a reporter for United Press International. My background in, my bachelor's degree and probably the lack of men around, frankly, because of Vietnam, I was able to work into a position there. And I covered the civil rights movement. Dr. King was still alive. I covered the funeral and the time after that when the civil rights, the Southern Christian Leadership Institute and others were really building more structures for justice for everybody in the country. So it was a really excellent time. I really got to take part in some fascinating things. Wanting to not have swing shifts, though, working at night. I'm a young woman, want to meet people. I changed into work where I was public information representative for the state of Georgia in a couple of cases. Stopped out after I got married to Bob Green. We had a child. I stopped out with her and went back into work, not just writing about things, but directing things. I was director of the Area Council's program for the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, working with a lot of volunteers. Got a master's in psychology, worked in management training, and probably about early 1990, late 1980s, I came down with an illness that I just could not shake. It was called chronic Epstein-Barr virus. And I had the virus symptoms for a while, and then I just had the fatigue. And I was forced into a position to work part-time, if at all, and part-time was really questionable too. It was at that time I started reading and not wanting the reading to go for naught. I said, I'm going to write. I always said I was going to write. Well, if I don't write now, I never will. And at least it will make me feel better. And so I started doing research, a lot of research into periods of time, and writing, taking a writing course or going to a writer's group when I had the energy. And this story just started evolving. About the same time we had property, my husband had property on the Georgia coast, and I was sitting on a small dock we'd built on the South Newport River with my legs over the dock, starting the first words to Abbeville Farewell. It was a coastal area, but it brought me the quiet, the serenity that I really needed to really take chances with writing, not to worry about what's going to happen with it. So I made many stabs at it, many trials, and years later was able to have published Abbeville Farewell, a novel of early Atlanta and North Georgia. Because of my illness, it took me a long time. Takes a long time for me anyway, but I'd done 10 years of research. Ask me anything about the Civil War and in the Revolutionary War in South Carolina, and I can tell you about it.
We're going to have a conversation about that specifically at some point in time. Yeah, let's do it. Go ahead.
I know you've got a travel opportunity for people to go to Franklin, Tennessee, where Widow of the South is, and you're featuring one of your your travel programs there, and that would be just really exciting. That's the sort of thing I did. I went to sites like that. My husband happened to be involved in Civil War history, and I was able to accompany him to those. All the time I'd have to rest for days afterwards, but I used saved up my energy to get some research in like that. So those were a lot of my experiences. So that got published.
So what happened after Abbeville Farewell that made you transition and try to write about Rising FAWN?
Well, I wanted a story that more people could relate to. One of the problems of historical fiction is people have to be interested in that period of time, and mine was 1820s to 1850s Georgia. And unless people are really interested in that period, it's sometimes hard for them to get into the story. So I wanted a more contemporary story. And I wanted it to really have a dramatic grab. What are people most concerned about? Number one, their relationships, if they're married, and if they're not married, are they going to be? That sort of thing. Or am I going to be in a forever relationship, whatever kind of relationship it's going to be, whether marriage or not? Is that going to be my future? Will that be something I experience? And the other thing is the vicissitudes of modern life. In this case, before COVID, we were concerned about things like mortgage fraud, credit card theft, credit card identity theft, period. I mean, who hasn't listened to those long lists of that have been stolen or compromised? So I had an idea for a story coming somewhat from my experience doing career counseling in an outplacement situation. I created Claire, who's a life coach, and she loses her life as she knows it due to credit card identity theft. Somebody starts taking out cash advances in her name 3,000 miles away in LA while she's in Atlanta, $10,000 worth. And she's just mystified where this came from. Well, her husband, Willie, she's been married 5 years. She's already acting a little suspicious. She thinks he's stepping out on her. She doesn't know. But then all of a sudden, she opens up her credit report, and lo, she's got a mortgage, a home equity line to the tune of $230,000. They owe $1,700 a month on something they never saw. So someone has pretended to be them. Well, Willie decides to kick her out. So I wanted to tell this story of what happens when you get thrown on your own devices. This woman is totally, she loses it in so many ways. You know, she tries to talk to a divorce lawyer. She wants $4,000 right away. She's just, oh my God, I don't know if I can do it. And her contract for career life coaching is expiring. Her mother is in a semi-coma state. She finds out her mother has property on the Alabama side of Lookout Mountain that's up for rent. She needs to come and take care of it. Some strange person is writing to her mother, who's now in a semi-coma state, that she needs to take care of it. So that causes her to go on a journey to go find this property and see about it. So it's a contemporary story. I started it probably in 2003, but a lot of things happened in work. I had to work, and I was working at Clayton State University as a tutoring, a writing tutor, and also I was teaching psychology courses. And all of a sudden, you know, we made this change on the property. My husband's mother died. All the close relatives we had, or the parents we had passed away. We just looked at each other. She had been sick for 10 years. And we said, if we don't do what we really want to do in life, we're going to be sick too. We won't be able to. So we decided to buy this property on the South Carolina coast. So making that purchase, making the VRBO work, didn't get a whole lot of writing done, did some. And then I had an opportunity to write a story with Majak Marrier. He was one of the Lost Boys of Sudan, lived in my neighborhood, close to me, and was a member of the church where I attended. And the pastoral associate brought me in to meet him. He had 100 pages of his story, and she wanted me to help him get it published. And it was definitely a detour from Rising Fawn, but I just couldn't avoid the opportunity. It was just a story that needed to be told, and he needed a great deal of help with it. It was not real clear where things were. There weren't maps, you know. The places that were named are not on maps. It was very pastoral, as the Carter Center calls it, meaning it's very undeveloped. It's villages and cattle camps and that sort of thing. So it's going to take a lot of work. But I decided I would do that because it would also give me an opportunity to show that I could be published. Traditionally, my first book was self-published. This book was picked up by McFarland Publishing. So we spent 2 years writing the story or interviewing for the story, got the contract. Then we spent another 2 years fact-checking, making sure we had all the information, expanding it so we could cover Lost Boys in other cities. We covered, we wrote about Manute Bol, who was a famous NBA basketball player from Sudan who contributed so much to the Sudanese revolution. And, we had to write about revolution. So what could be better for a former UPI reporter? So those were some of the things. Not only did we write the book, that was 4 years writing the book, we set up a nonprofit. So that was another couple of years getting a nonprofit started so that we could help Majak build water wells in South Sudan. So now we have a foundation or a nonprofit called Wells for Hope for South Sudan. And there's a webpage for that, wellsforhopeforsouthsudan.org, that you can learn more about.
Can you repeat
all of that?
Repeat that and I'll type it in. What is it again? I'm so sorry. Wells.
The name?
I'm sorry, all of a
I'm sorry.
sudden I've got an alert that we've got a poor connection and I'm having a hard time hearing you. That was Wells for Hope,
Okay.
southsudan.org.
It's Wells for Hope for South Sudan. Wells for Hope for South
Okay,
Sudan
perfect.
.org. Yeah. And we also
Okay,
have a website, if a
okay,
Facebook page, if you
perfect.
go look up that in Facebook. So, so where's Rising Fawn at this moment? I've got to get it done, right? And I
Yeah,
had a lot of good help along
right.
the line. I'd taken workshops with Carolee Lorenzo in Atlanta as I was writing it. I went to workshops, the Atlanta Appalachian Writers Workshop. I was invited to that. C. Michael Curtis, who's the fiction editor of Atlantic Magazine. I was in a workshop with him. He liked the story. Um, but I was kind of hamstrung on being able to do much with it. Once we moved here, I said, I'm going to be involved with the Pat Conroy Center, and this is going to get done. 5 days after we
Oh,
moved here came Hurricane Matthew. And so we spent a good part of the next
goodness.
documenting three feet of water across our property, soaking a lot of our belongings because they were in the garage, and losing the refrigerator out there, lawnmower, lots and lots of records and old furniture and family pictures. I can't tell you. And then that's just my stuff. My husband lost a lot of equipment. We had to spend a whole summer just documenting all that. Then the next year was Hurricane Irma. The next year I had ovarian cancer. So it was like, this is not good for this book. But once I got the diagnosis on the ovarian cancer, they said you have a 92% chance of long-term survival if you do these chemo drugs. And it was going to take 9 weeks. And I said, okay, I've been delayed before. I'll just keep writing. And I was at the my writing group at the Pat Conroy Center. Will tell you I would come in with hair dressings, with sometimes a wig, but my hair fell out. But I was there. I was determined, and I think that helped me with the illness, kicking the illness, because I had a goal, and this was just a little bump in the road. So I worked on the finalizing that group was helpful. Another group I was in with Tim Johnston, that was very helpful. So I began looking for a publisher, and through some contacts at Pat Conroy Center, I was able to contact one that published my book right in the middle of the pandemic. I had a choice. I could wait till the pandemic wanes, or I could go right into the middle of it. So January 1st, 2021, Rising Fawn was published by Whip and Stock. Whip and Stock is a large publisher of, it's a niche publisher in Eugene, Oregon. They did a really good job, very professional. They do many, 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 many books every year, so they're very professional what they do. But a guy in Eugene, Oregon was choosing the cover, and he chose Hemlock Falls from Cloudland Canyon. So that's what's on the cover of my book. So it was a really exciting experience. So
Yeah.
no bookstores doing events, but people like Jonathan
And
Hopp.
that's how we met. And I featured your
Yes,
novel.
yes,
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of that. Estelle, I was wondering if you would be willing to read an
sure.
excerpt from Rising Fawn to our audience. We do have Woody joining us and Barb as well. And we're going to do a few question and answers towards the end if they're still in the studio audience. And I'm keeping an eye on the YouTube live to see if we have any questions that come across there. But yeah, at this point, I would love to see what excerpt you pick out of Rising Fawn. I did read it in 2021, and I always love listening to the author read their own words. Go
Thank
for it,
you. Thank
Estelle.
you. I've asked people in Chattanooga to be especially alerted I was on tonight. So I'm going to choose a part that describes one of the waterfalls. And part of the theme of the book for me was how nature can be a healer. Here's Claire. She's lost her husband. He has all the family. She has no family. He has all the family. So she's lost all the family that she's known. Her mother is still alive, but her mother is in a semi-coma state, and she's really not been much of a mother to start with. Well, as she's up on top of Lookout Mountain trying to look into this house, she meets Tony, who's a cousin. Turns out that Tony is Italian, and Claire never really thought about much about Italian roots or Italian family because her mother, while she was Italian and cooked Italian food, still didn't talk much about it. And her father was Irish, so there was that part that was not known much to her either. So she meets Tony, and he helps her learn a lot more about the family background. And there are lots of sad stories about family conflict and family problems. And so here she is up on top of the mountain, and this guy who's crippled, he's disabled. He drives a nice big General Motors car. It's his baby. He enjoys it. But he's, rather than answer her many questions about family that she's trying to uncover, he kind of says, well, let's go look at some of these places first. I want you to see these places, then I can answer your questions about family. And by the way, she's just fallen and almost lost her life on one of the aspects of the mountain, a holdover from the coal mines that were up there. Okay, so she's with Tony, and they've gone to Lula Lake, which is now in a land trust, thank goodness, on top of Lookout Mountain. It's an area that people can visit. When I was growing up, it was not public, but we went in as family members. We could get access to it. Anyway, this is Claire talking to Tony. They're in that big Buick up on top of the mountain at Lula Lake, near the gates that go across one lake, a crater lake, and then they run off, and she'll describe what's after. She looked at Tony across the seat from her, the only family connection she had. With her mother in her last days back in Atlanta, he was all she had. But he, like her mother, was secretive, urging her to hold her questions until he showed her something up here at the lake. Should she trust him? She did not feel threatened physically, as his body left him few ways to flee if he did something awful. But she did feel she was on an emotional shaky ground because he had the power to play with her need to find out about her family's secrets. Was he toying with that power now? Claire opened the door and came around the large car to Tony's side. The loud whoosh of tons of water falling grew in Claire's ears, and she turned to see just beyond where the creek fell over ledge under the walking bridge. I hope that what you're going to show me is better than this little piddling stream, she joked with him. I think you'll like it, he smiled as she opened the door behind him and pulled out his chair. They call it Rock Creek. It's a little obvious, he said. He was agile in lifting himself to the chair and wheeling to the footbridge over the water. Claire pushed the chair up the incline of the bridge and over to the other side of the creek, watching the water coursing down a shelf of rock into a cavernous opening in the mountain. When she walked them past where the creek fell, she saw a large crater lake in the side of the mountain. The creek now fell in a diagonal staircase about 30 feet into the lake, forming a deep green pool with a dramatic rock wall that rose 100 or more feet above the lake on the left side. On the right, where they stood, the railroad bed continued to edge the right slope of the mountain. On the left and below them was a descent to the lake. A steep foot trail snaked down the ridge between the boulders, bushes, and trees overhanging the lake. They talk about some of the things that have taken place there. There was a double murder. Somebody fell and diving into the lake, broke their neck and died. Hit a rock in the water and broke his neck. Died, of course, Tony said. Places like this seem to have their legends, Claire said. It's almost like they're these mythical people with stories growing up about them through the ages. Only these are true, Tony said. But the legends have their lessons. Like the man who provided for the preservation of this area. To think you can live your life and then preserving a spot like this goes on giving to generations, you never will know. It's a kind of redemption for all the bad things that happened here. People can now come here and be renewed and hopefully not have anything bad happen. Only good things that can come from being near this amazing water. Didn't know you were such a poet, Claire. Well, I'm not a poet, but this place moves me. Before too much of the day goes, you need to go on down that trail to see what happens after Rock Creek runs off over there. He motioned with his arm to the trail on the right. I'll be fine sitting here watching the birds and the waterfall. Okay, when you get back, there'll be a quiz. See if you can find Insurance Bluff. That's where car stripping gangs took advantage of all the new shopping centers in the 60s, stole cars, stripped them, sold their parts, pushed the cars off over the cliff. Shivers again. Why was there always mayhem mixed in with beauty? Claire looked at the trail. She couldn't see much for the tree cover, but it was apparent that the creek continued its slight descent there on her left. The steep side of the mountain on the right held a trail that she could manage with care. She walked along it and eventually saw that the sky was opening up in front of her. The sound of water followed her, even though it disappeared behind trees that began to separate her from the creek below. After a few minutes of walking the trail, she emerged to see a huge gorge that opened up toward the valley below. It was as if the mountain wore a deep gash in its side with a creek at the base, only it was covered in trees, green on green, with little ground visible through it all. A wall of green grew up across the gorge from her. When she looked up to the left, she saw a dramatic waterfall, water lopping over a ledge so high she could not see the end of it, and misting lifted from below where it was hitting rock. The sound was louder, more than the sound of the creek tumbling over rocks. It was just a wide sheet of water falling over the edge, a waterfall of at least 100 feet. Hawaii must be like this, she told herself. Moisture from the mist formed droplets on her face. It was like nothing she'd seen before, so exotic, so removed from normal existence. She figured the green wall across from her was probably Insurance Bluff, where car strippers had dumped vehicles once they were done with them. It was hard to believe, as the trees and growth were so thick there was no sign of a road. So much beauty mixed with the crime. Like life, she decided. So that's just a picture of Lula Lake Falls.
It's beautiful. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that you mentioned. Um, the sound of running water, that's negative ions, and that's what's good for us spiritually and emotionally. And in my travels, I have seen many of beautiful waterfall. Some of the best have been in Costa Rica, and just even here in Parker, Colorado. I always have to say, full disclosure, on Friday I will be back in the Low Country and not up here in the High Country in Colorado. But there's a creek that runs through the open space out in front of where I live, and there. At one point in time, for drainage reasons and things like that, they put in a man-made waterfall, but nature has taken over, and it's someplace I go every single day. Um,
Oh,
the nature does heal, and can you tell me just a little bit more about what you think about the Low Country? Um, you said that earlier, you said that it was a very serene environment, so you were able, one, to heal from a very difficult illness, and you also been able to write a book. Just share a little bit more about the Low Country around Beaufort, South Carolina with us.
glad to. It's it's very accessible. And I remember going to a wedding in a northern town near the Cape Cod, not at Cape Cod. I didn't ever get to Cape Cod, but this is close by. And I remember going to the front on a Sunday with my husband, and we wanted to park and just look at the waterfront. And this man comes up to our car, knocks on our window, and said, "You can't park here. Only residents could park there." And even with parking things. And so that, to me, that's not accessible. Here, people have been generous to make grants to allow land to be preserved so that you have watersheds, what are called view sheds, rather, viewpoints around the county over the marshes, where you can just pull over in the road and just look, just enjoy it and not have anything bother the view that you have. Um, it's it changes things. We just went out on the dock with our grandchildren several times in the last few days, and the neighbor children across the street, our couples, older people like ourselves, walk out, and people just want to sit. They just want to sit and look. And we used to be sailors. We're not anymore. That although we'd love to sail, we're just not investing in the boat. We're investing in our property. And we just sit and watch the water a lot of the time. Kayaking, canoeing, some of the more sedentary and less motorized recreations. It's a lot of fun. And it, I think this happens in just about any environment. It certainly happened in Tennessee. I just wasn't paying attention when I was growing up. But there are seasons and certain things, certain kinds of seasons, and birds that come at certain times and not at others. My mother was a wonderful birder. She loved a bird or identified birds and paid a lot of attention to them. I could have cared less. Of course, there were a lot of things when I was young I cared less about, and now I'm an avid birder. I'm an avid birder. I pay attention. I can tell the difference between different ones that other people. We have
What
dueling
what have you,
bird books where we compete ideas.
what have you
So
seen in the last?
those are.
Oh, I'm sorry. What have you
What I
seen in the
saw.
last 24 hours?
Thank you for asking. I saw a great blue heron, which we frequently have on our marsh, and a green heron that looks almost like a Louisiana heron. It's different. It's got different colors. Um, and my husband and I were competing, contrasting our views of what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was the green heron because they're in our freshwater area. We have freshwater ponds also. And then there was a little, I'm not sure how it got there, but there was a little green frog, a little tree frog that got out to the dock with us. And he jumped off, so we couldn't see him. I think he was in a container that we were throwing water out of. So he had come from the deck area of our house. And my husband went out there this afternoon, and he comes back with a container that he had used to throw out crab parts. And there's that little guy. He had waited under one of the chairs we had out there in the shade for 24 hours to hitch a ride back.
That's
250
awesome.
feet away. It was so funny. It was like, I knew
Oh,
you'd come.
that's awesome.
I just waited.
I just
We have a
waited
lot,
and waited.
we have a lot of
Oh,
anoles, or what people think of as geckos. We have a lot of those. They're around, and you can almost see the little the little gecko that's on the ad for one of the insurance companies. You can almost see them talking to you. But so those are
so
just
how do
normal.
people, I'm sorry to interrupt. How do people order your book, Rising Fawn, or find out more information? What's the best place to order? And then I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, streaming on the app, we have Estelle's website, which is estelleford-williamson.com. But where else is your book sold, Estelle?
They can get it through my website. I can send it to them inscribed, as well as some of the other books I've written. And you can get it from any independent bookstore. If you just, go to your local bookstore that normally can order books, you can ask for them to look up Rising Fawn with my name, and they can order it for you. Or you can get it locally in Chattanooga. I'll just mention Chattanooga because this is where it's at. Winder Binder has copies. In Beaufort, all three bookstores, Macintosh Books, Beaufort Bookstore, Nevermore Books have the book. But any independent bookstore can order it. You can't find it on Amazon. And, if you do buy it from there, please leave a review there. I'd love to know what
Yeah,
you
for
think.
sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
so
So
very
I
available.
have
And
time
any
for one more question. I wanted to ask you, you talked about it earlier, but tell us more about your involvement with the Pat Conroy Literary Center. I took an actual memoir workshop with you, and I hope that there's more in the future. But tell me a little bit about how you heard about it when you first moved into Beaufort, and what all you do with the Pat Conroy Literary Center.
I'll be glad to. Pat was somebody I knew about earlier. He was known as a writer to most everybody in the South. I was in Atlanta. He lived in Atlanta part of when he was writing two of his biggest books, the Great Santini and also Prince of Tides, and probably some other parts. He was in Beaufort a good part of his life, but he was also in Atlanta. He was also in Italy. So he had various places that he lived. But I'd always followed him. My sister-in-law was good friends with him. Sue Hershey Ford is my sister-in-law, and she arrived the same year that Pat did at Beaufort High School. Her father was head of the PX. He was a colonel in the Marines, so he knew the great Santini. The families knew each other. It was just that had stuck in my mind a good bit. But I'd seen him at Emory. I'd seen him speak at Emory. He'd signed books for me. I wasn't totally there, but unfortunately, I was not able to meet him much in Beaufort. We were not yet here when we did move here. He had just passed away. But his spirit was there. I knew his writing. And if you didn't know him, you can get to know him very easily through his writing. One of my favorite books is My Losing Season. It's autobiographical, it's memoir. It's written just as beautifully as his other books, but much more personal about his family. It's undisguised, his family. And he began to he described the process of him and Kathy taking care of his father, the father who had been so abusive toward them, the whole family, and how they started making their moves toward each other through that process of Don being ill. So it, you got to hand it to the guy. His work got made into movies, not just any movie, but big movies. And I know that was heady for him, but it was also a huge burden. So if I want to just pick anything he's written, he's revelatory. He's talking about things that are real to people, abuse and things that people hadn't written about before. He writes about the marshes in such a beautiful way, and other nature as well. Anything you pick up that he's written, I love his cookbooks are like world, travel books. They're just recipes drawn from everywhere, and they're, of course, full of stories. So it's a wonderful place to be surrounded with stories. I'm a docent there. I do workshops. People come in to see the center, which is an interpretive center. It's not a stuffy museum. It's a lot of his materials, but above all, people who knew him. And I'm always amazed. People walk in and they tell us more stories almost than we can tell them, because they met Pat, or Pat's books meant so much to them. It's kind of unreal. There's a saying that life is short, but art is long. And that's what I keep in mind as I'm doing my writing. It takes a lot of work to sit in a place and just write and rewrite and rewrite. You mean I need to rewrite it again? Revise. So it's like, but it lives on. It lives on, and Pat's living on. And he's influenced many people to also become writers and to be known as writers. And what could be more amazing than that? So
exactly. Thank you for that. Estelle, I have one final question, and then wanted to see if anyone in our audience had a question for you. My question is, last time we met and I featured your book club, excuse me, I'm tongue-tied. I featured Rising Fawn in my virtual book club. I asked you, I wanted to know more. Is Claire going to learn more about the Irish side of her family? And I re-listened to our meeting today, and you said you had to travel to Ireland maybe and do some research. Have you thought more about doing that?
I'm planning to do it in June, late June, and I'm really looking forward to it. I have
awesome.
Some of the characters, there are some characters in my family who intrude in Rising Fawn. They were, my great grandfather was a stonemason from Dublin, and a stonemason is really like an engineer at the time, because they designed structures and they requisitioned the stone and they directed the placement. So they were pretty important people. He came to the Tennessee Valley in the 1840s, I think, to build railroad bridges. And if you've been through that area, to me, it's like a mini Grand Canyon. It's not as marvelous as the Grand Canyon, but there's so many layers of soil and so many colors to it, and so many residues of all the I'll talk in Rising Fawn about the earthquakes and the ice age and the snow melts and all the things that took place. It was all covered it was covered with coastal water. There are seashells that you find in lots of the parts of the mountains. So all that magnificent history is on display as you drive through that area. So he was building stoneworks for those for the railroad bridges that went through there, and some of them are quite large. So I'm looking for.
He's from Dublin, you said?
I think it's Dublin. I have to really check. I know that I'm pretty sure County Wicklow plays in there, but I don't know if that's him or the family he moved into.
Okay.
I'm just in the process of beginning that. I don't want to be too surprised. I mean, I
don't want. Well, you know,
I
you
want to
can go to
spot.
the,
I want to know everything. I want to just
yeah,
kind of absorb the country, and then at the
yeah.
same time do the heavy research I need to do.
Wonderful.
So,
I'm
look,
excited you're going over. I was able to visit Ireland twice in 2018 and 2019, and I was so
my
thankful that I was able to do that. The
yeah.
first one was on a like a middle school tour trip. We went really fast in a lot of different places. The second one, I went on an Irish rugby tour, and both
Oh,
of my middle son and my youngest son played rugby, and it was so enjoyable from the sense that we
wow.
immersed ourselves in the culture and met people from Ireland and were at their schools, and they treated us after the games, the matches, excuse me, and it was a wonderful experience. So I can't wait to hear about your trip to Ireland.
Oh, thanks.
I we have Barb in the audience. I invited her to speak. I don't know. Earlier we had Woody and Paul and a few other folks. I'll just see if just want to say to the audience if there's anybody that has a question, feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring you up. Or if we're new to Fireside and we're not ready for that, I totally understand and respect that as well. Estelle, I just wanted to number one, let you do some closing remarks, and then I want to thank you and tell everybody what's next for Tales from the Low Country with me. But
Great.
Estelle, how would you like to end the evening?
Well, I guess each time I've been on a program, I've had an opportunity to have people get with me sometimes and say, I really want to do some more writing. I want to get into what are the best things to do, and all I can tell you is take some time with it, allow it to gestate. It takes a while to become an accomplished writer, and there's a phrase that there was a I used to hear at some of the writer conferences, and that is fail better. Get used to just failing better every time. It's a
Uh-huh.
process of learning how to write and learning how to write well. I was a nonfiction writer, and in 1990s, I had to learn to be a fiction writer, and I took a lot of workshops
Mm-hmm.
trying to do that. Carol Lee Lorenzo's particularly, and Richard Bausch and people like that. So don't be afraid to learn more and take people's advice, even people that you think really don't know what they're talking about. Usually there's a grain of truth in that. So I wish everyone who's listening luck. And if you're like a lot of my friends who read the book, they went immediately to all trails and started finding some trails in Tennessee that they wanted to, in North Georgia around Lookout Mountain that they wanted to go on. So happy trails.
Absolutely. I love the All Trails app and thank you for sharing those comments. I think so many of us that are readers have dreams of someday writing and it's an intimidating dream. So what you just shared was very real and I really
Well, thank
appreciate
you
that
for letting me
advice.
talk.
Oh, of course, of course. Well, I just wanted to once again thank and wrap up the show. Estelle Ford-Williamson is a friend of mine that I met down in Beaufort, South Carolina. She has had a very um, I don't want to say lengthy because you're still a young whippersnapper like me, but a very successful career in a variety of different areas, being a reporter, being a nonfiction writer, helping get a story out and creating a nonprofit for the Lost Boys of Sudan, and then writing this wonderful fiction novel, Rising Fawn, and incorporating modern challenges and nature healing and good family stories. But I just want to thank you again, Estelle, and everybody watching or listening. Post basically every other week. I'm trying to do a Tales from the Low Country show here on Fireside, which simultaneously casts, if everything's working well, on YouTube and also over on Facebook. And if you ever want to meet more authors and get more interactive, I have what's called a virtual book club over on Facebook. It's Susie L.
Yay.
McMahon's Virtual Book Club. It's a closed group because I want it to be intimate and that we build community. And what's really neat about it, and this is how I met Estelle, is I feature an author that we read that author's book. The next month I do a live stream interview with the author, and that author pays it forward to a future featured author. And Estelle introduced us to the guest I had a couple weeks ago, our performer, Jennifer. Daniels Neal, who is a singer songwriter, performer, and also novelist, and she's also an educator. And what I love about the fact that I just take the reference from you, the author, and blanket say, okay, I'm going to feature this next person. It takes me out of the middle to try to decide, is this person qualified or whatever. I just love the way writers and authors pay it forward to one another. And it's kept me busy for 2.5 years, and I've met so many wonderful people like Estelle.
Thank you. It's a wonderful,
Thanks
wonderful
again.
club.
Thank you again. And thank you, Estelle, for learning Fireside. I'm sorry about some of the technical glitches we had tonight, but we all learned to live and roll with that. At this point, I'm just going to say thank you, Estelle. Thank you, Woody and Barb and others that have joined us this evening. And